So basically the blood which enters through these blood vessels, mainly the afferent arteriole, in the glomerulus, the bunch of capillaries in the glomerulus, this blood goes out through the efferent arteriole, and then it proceeds further as the peritubular capillaries. So the basic mechanisms which help in the formation of urine are, first of all, the filtration of the fluid, that is glomerular filtration. That is the filtration which is taking place in the glomerulus. That is the first step in the formation of urine. The next comes the reabsorption of certain substances in the tubules, and the third one also, the secretion, will be I'll be telling you later, and ultimately the urine is formed. And so whatever is filtered, majority of it gets reabsorbed in the tubules, and only small amount gets excreted. As you can see here, how much is the GFR written here and how much is reabsorbed. So almost 99% is reabsorbed and 1% gets excreted. So first of all, renal blood flow. This is very high. In the kidney, the blood flow is very high. It is about 22% of the cardiac output. Although you must be knowing the size, the weight of kidney, it is so small structure, but it has a very high blood flow. So the normal value of blood flow is 1.2 to 1.3 liters per minute. And this high blood flow is needed for high GFR. So the oxygen and nutrients which are delivered to kidneys normally greatly exceeds their metabolic needs. So it's much more, because there's so much of blood flow in the kidneys. So the amount of nutrients, the amount of oxygen which is being delivered to kidneys is much more than its basic requirement. Another thing which is important as far as kidney is concerned is the AV oxygen difference across the kidney is very low. You must have seen in various other tissues, there is a lot of difference between the arterial and venous oxygen levels, but here it is very low. And the cortical blood flow is more than that of the medulla. The blood flow in the renal cortex is much more than medulla. You must, if you remember this figure, there is so much peritubular capillaries in the cortex, and this is the cortical nephron. And as we all know, there are 85% of the nephrons are the cortical nephrons. So there is a rich blood supply in the cortex as compared to medulla. So what are the determinants of renal blood flow? Renal blood flow can be derived from the pressure difference between the renal artery and vein upon the vascular resistance, the total renal vascular resistance. So it can be determined by pressure difference upon the vascular resistance. So pressure difference is obviously the pressure difference between the renal artery and pressure between the renal artery and renal vein, and the resistance is total renal vascular resistance. By total renal vascular resistance, we mean of the afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole, and the veins. So sum of all resistances in kidney vasculature forms the resistance. So these two parameters will indicate the renal blood flow. Now, next aspect is renal plasma flow. So it is the volume of blood plasma delivered to the kidneys per unit time. As we all know that renal blood flow is, I told you earlier, it is 1.2 to 1.3 liters per minute, but to make it simplified, I have taken the value of 1 liter here. So renal blood flow, suppose, is 1 liter or 1000 ml per minute. We know that hematocrit is approximately 40%. So how much is the plasma left? 60% of it. So renal plasma flow is approximately 600 ml per minute. This is not the exact value. This is the approximate value, just to simplify your calculations. Okay. So renal plasma flow is 60% of the renal blood flow, and it is actually the plasma which is delivered, because it is the plasma which is going to be filtered. As we all know, the cellular component are not filtered normally from the kidneys. Okay. So basically, kidney functions by these mechanisms. First is the filtration which is taking place in the glomerulus, that is glomerular filtration. The second is reabsorption which is taking place in the tubules. Third is the secretion, again, certain important substances, certain excretory products which are still remaining in the plasma, they get secreted in the tubules. And another important function is concentration of whatever has been come to the tubules and whatever needs to be excreted. The urine finally gets concentrated by reabsorption of water and various other mechanisms we'll study later. So the first component of the formation of urine, or the first process, is the glomerular filtration. So what is glomerular filtration rate? GFR is the amount of filtrate formed per minute by both the kidneys combined. It is ultrafiltration, that is filtration is taking place under pressure. The composition of GFR is same as that of plasma, except for obviously in the plasma there are except for proteins, but cells are not there in the plasma, so the composition is same as plasma except proteins and cells. They are not filtered out, and the normal value is 125 ml per minute, which amounts to about 180 liter per day. So you need to remember these normal values of GFR: 125 ml per minute or 180 liters per day. An average of 99% of the filtrate is reabsorbed, so that only 1 to 2 liter of urine per day is excreted. So you can see here that almost 180 liter per day is being filtered from the glomerulus, and just 1 to 2 liter of urine is passing out. So 99% of it gets reabsorbed. So there is another term now in context with this, and that is filtration fraction. By filtration fraction, we mean GFR upon renal plasma flow. So if we take the value of GFR is 120 and renal plasma flow at 600, then the value comes 0.2. So filtration fraction is 0.2, or we can say 20% of the plasma is filtered. So whatever amount of plasma is passing through the glomerulus, almost 20% of it gets filtered as the filtrate. So that is filtration fraction. Now, what are the determinants of GFR? The most important determinants of GFR are the Starling's forces. Now, what are Starling's forces? Starling's forces are the hydrostatic pressures and the colloid osmotic pressures at various places. Now, here in this figure, this is a depiction of glomerulus. This is a glomerulus. This is afferent arteriole. This one is efferent arteriole. And this is Bowman's capsule. So, if there is increased hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus, this will cause more filtration. So this arrow is indicating more amount of fluid moving in this direction. That means filtration is more. On the other hand, if there is more colloid osmotic pressure in the glomerulus, what will colloid osmotic pressure do? It will try to retain water inside. Okay, so in that condition, this direction will be indicated. That is, less amount of fluid is filtered out. More will be moving in this direction. In the Bowman's capsule also, there can be hydrostatic pressure and osmotic pressure, but in Bowman's capsule, oncotic pressure is not there because under normal conditions, proteins are not coming out. So we can consider oncotic pressure as 0 here. So what is there in Bowman's capsule is just the hydrostatic pressure. So if this pressure, hydrostatic pressure in the Bowman's capsule increases due to certain conditions, then what will happen? There will be there will be decrease in the GFR. That means this direction of the fluid flow means that there will be decrease. The fluid cannot be filtered in this particular direction. Okay, so these are the main factors of Starling's forces which cause or help or prevent whatever in the filtration of the fluid from the glomerulus. So if we take the balance of all these forces, then it is known as net filtration pressure. Okay, so these are the values written of these pressures. The glomerular hydrostatic pressure is about 60 millimeter mercury. Colloid osmotic pressure is 32 millimeter mercury. Bowman's capsule hydrostatic pressure is 18 millimeter mercury. So this particular thing is favoring the filtration. These two components are inhibiting the filtration. So we can say that net filtration pressure is glomerular hydrostatic pressure minus Bowman's capsule pressure and minus glomerular oncotic pressure. So if we add these two values, this is 50 millimeter mercury. Hydrostatic pressure is 60 millimeter mercury. So difference of the two is 10 millimeter mercury. So net filtration pressure is 10 millimeter mercury. So I hope you have understood this. The main important forces which are acting here to alter the GFR. So these Starling's forces are the hydrostatic pressure inside the glomerular capillaries. It will promote filtration. The hydrostatic pressure in Bowman's capsule will oppose filtration, because if there is no pressure in the Bowman's capsule, obviously the filtration will be less. Colloid osmotic pressure in the glomerular capillaries, just mainly due to plasma proteins, it will oppose filtration because they will try to retain the fluid inside them because of the increase in oncotic pressure, and hence they will oppose filtration. But if there is increase in the colloid osmotic pressure of proteins in Bowman's capsule, then it will promote filtration. But under normal circumstances, this is not there. Proteins under normal situations are not excreted. So in Bowman's capsule, we do not have any proteins. So that factor is not considered under normal situations. But if in certain abnormal conditions, if this is also there, then it will promote filtration. So these are the major determinants of GFR. It's a very important question, asked in exams also, GFR and its determinants. So these are the primary determinants. Apart from it, this is also a very important determinant of GFR, and that is capillary filtration coefficient. Now this capillary filtration coefficient depends upon two factors. First is permeability, and second is the filtering surface area of the capillaries. So if there will be more permeability, obviously more amount of filtrate will be produced. And if there is more surface area of the capillaries, more amount of fluid can be filtered out. So this is the product of these two things. That is the hydraulic conductivity and the surface area. Okay, so this is also a very important determinant of GFR, that is filtration coefficient. Normally, it is not highly variable, but in conditions like uncontrolled hypertension or diabetes, there will be reduce of this value of filtration coefficient because there will be increase in thickness, eventually damaging the capillaries. So whenever there is thickness of the basement membrane, as happens in uncontrolled hypertension or diabetes, this will cause, will affect the filtration, it will affect the permeability, and it is going to affect the filtration. So hence the main determinants of GFR are filtration coefficient and net filtration pressure. Right? So these are the two important determinants. Then you need to mention what all factors affect the filtration coefficient and what all factors influence the net filtration pressure. And here's the normal value of GFR, 125 ml per minute or 180 liters per day. Net filtration pressure is 10 millimeter mercury and coefficient is around 12.5 milliliter. So if we multiply both these, then it will come 125 ml per minute. So GFR can be calculated or determined by these two major factors, and there are subsequent other factors which are ultimately causing changes in filtration pressure or coefficient. Now, what is the effect of afferent and efferent arteriolar constriction on glomerular pressure? So here you can see the same figure. This is the glomerulus, this is the afferent arteriole, the efferent arteriole. And here you can see it is constricted. The afferent arteriole is constricted. Increased RA means there is increased resistance of the arteriole, afferent arteriole. Okay, so when the resistance of the afferent arteriole increases, what is going to happen to the blood flow? There will be a decrease in the renal blood flow. Okay, so when the blood flowing inside the glomerulus is less, the hydrostatic pressure is also going to decrease. And once the hydrostatic pressure is going to decrease, GFR is going to decrease. You can compare this situation with that of a pipe which is being constricted. Suppose this is a garden hose pipe which has got a constriction and it has holes at a particular location. These are the holes present here in this pipe, and this is the constriction shown here. So if it is constricted at that place, the amount of water which is flowing inside this pipe will be less because of this constriction. So the water which is already filled in this area comes out, but with a less pressure, isn't it? So this is simulation of the condition of afferent arteriolar constriction. Because of this afferent arteriolar constriction, there is less pressure, less hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus, leading to decreased GFR, decreased renal blood flow. The second condition is when there is constriction of efferent arterioles. Now again, if you see the same hose pipe, the water is flowing freely till this area where there were holes, but the outflow is constricted. So what will happen? There's high amount of pressure here, and all the fluid which is flowing out, that is flowing out with great pressure. So GFR is very much increased. Obviously, renal blood flow will be less because here there is constriction. There is somewhere constriction in the pathway. Our renal blood flow is going to decrease. Okay, so constricting either arteriole, afferent or efferent, will reduce the renal blood flow. But constriction of afferent arteriole will reduce GFR also. On the other hand, constriction of efferent arteriole will increase or maintain GFR. Sometimes it is not just increasing, it is just maintaining the GFR, trying to maintain it to the normal level. Right? So again, I'll repeat because this is a very important concept. If afferent arteriole gets constricted, the amount of fluid flowing inside the glomerulus decreases. So pressure, hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus is going to decrease. There will be decreased GFR, decreased renal blood flow. The second condition is when afferent arteriole is fine, working fine, there's no constriction here, but the efferent arteriole is constricted. In that condition, the area prior to this constriction will have a lot of fluid inside, there'll be increase in pressure there, and there'll be increased hydrostatic pressure, leading to increase in glomerular filtration rate, but renal blood flow is going to decrease in both the conditions. So Bowman's capsule, first we'll come one by one to all these Starling forces which are altering the GFR. So in what all conditions does the Bowman's capsule hydrostatic pressure altered? If there is any tubular obstruction, as can happen in kidney stones or tubular necrosis, or the urinary tract is being obstructed due to any cause, what will happen? There will be back pressure, and back pressure causes increase in the Bowman's capsule hydrostatic pressure. So anything which is obstructing the pathway of flow is going to cause back pressure, and Bowman's capsule hydrostatic pressure is going to increase. Now, what is going to alter glomerular capillary oncotic pressure? First of all, arterial plasma oncotic pressure. If there is more oncotic pressure in the fluid which is coming inside, it is going to increase the oncotic pressure of the glomerulus also, okay, because that is the inflow. The arteries which are carrying the blood, if they are high in the oncotic pressure, that will increase the oncotic pressure of the glomerulus. That is the direct mechanism. Second is the filtration fraction. If you remember, we have just now discussed what is filtration fraction. So amount of fluid which is filtered out of the whole plasma, the amount of GFR, that is GFR upon the renal plasma flow, is filtration fraction. So if filtration fraction increases, that is also going to increase the oncotic pressure. How? I'll tell you in this figure. What is this showing? This is again the glomerulus, the afferent arteriole here, and the efferent arteriole here. It is showing the net filtration pressure and how it decreases along the glomerulus because of increasing glomerular colloid osmotic pressure. How is it happening? As the fluid starts entering from the afferent arteriole, it enters the glomerulus and the filtration starts. You can see the amount of filtration, the amount of fluid being filtered from the glomerulus entering into the Bowman's capsule. So as the fluid passes from this end to this end, that is from the afferent side to the efferent side, so much fluid has been filtered. And as the fluid is filtered, the proteins are staying back, isn't it? As the proteins are staying back, the oncotic pressure has to increase. So as we move from the arteriolar end towards, afferent arteriolar end to efferent arteriolar end, you can see the value of the oncotic pressure being increased. It was 28 here, it is 36 here. Okay, and this is mainly because the fluid are all being filtered, and as more and more fluid is being filtered, the oncotic pressure keeps on rising. So this is the change in oncotic pressure from the afferent arteriolar end to the efferent arteriolar end. Net filtration pressure was 14 here in the initial part of the glomerulus, that is towards the afferent arteriolar side, and it becomes 6 at the efferent arteriolar side. Just to remind you, what is net filtration pressure? It is the difference of these Starling's forces with these pressures, mainly the glomerular hydrostatic pressure, which is favoring the GFR, and the other oncotic pressure of the glomerulus, and the Bowman's capsule pressure, which is hindering the flow. Okay, and as it comes from here to here, since oncotic pressure is increasing, net filtration pressure is decreasing. I hope it's clear now, because oncotic pressure was less here, it keeps on increasing due to the filtrate, and therefore the net filtration pressure, if we calculate, it starts at 14 here and it decreases because this oncotic pressure is increasing. Now this red curve indicates in normal conditions, starting from the value of 28 to 36, as I told you, this is the afferent end and this is the efferent arteriolar end. So if we move from afferent end to the efferent side, we observe that the oncotic pressure, that is glomerular colloid osmotic pressure keeps on increasing. This red curve shows that. Now, the blue curve indicates that if the filtration fraction is increased, if there is more amount of filtration fraction is increased, then it will further increase. Osmotic pressure is going to increase further. And if the filtration fraction is decreasing here, as shown by the green curve, then the osmotic pressure is going to decrease. So it is dependent on the filtration fraction. Coming to the next pressure, that is glomerular hydrostatic pressure. It is the determinant of GFR, most subject to physiological control. That means various things which are altering, like arterial pressure, afferent arterial resistance. There are various components which alter these parameters. Efferent arterial resistance, they are going to alter directly the hydrostatic pressure. Okay, because if the blood arterial pressure increases, it is going to increase, although there is an effect buffered by autoregulation, which we'll discuss later. But it is a direct depiction of the arterial pressure. If the blood pressure in the arteries are more, there will be more hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus. Then it also depends upon the resistance of afferent arterioles and efferent arterioles. This we have seen when there is constriction of these arterioles. Coming to other factors which are controlling GFR and renal blood flow. One is sympathetic nervous system and catecholamines, because they have a similar function. So what are they doing? Sympathetic nervous system is increasing the resistance of afferent arterioles and efferent arterioles. As we all know, sympathetic nervous system is a vasoconstrictor. So it is causing constriction of afferent as well as efferent arterioles. So due to their constriction, the resistance is increasing. So both afferent and efferent arteriolar resistance is increasing. And due to the increase of this resistance, both the GFR and renal blood flow is going to decrease. The whole pipe is constricted in a way we can say, so both the renal blood flow will decrease and the GFR is also going to decrease. So that is the effect of sympathetic nervous system stimulation or catecholamines. This happens in severe hemorrhage as a compensatory mechanism. Second is angiotensin II. Now this angiotensin II has a preferential role on efferent arterioles. It is not acting on afferent arterioles. So it is increasing, it's a vasoconstrictor, it is increasing efferent arterioles. So it is increasing the resistance of efferent arterioles. That means it is causing constriction of efferent arterioles. So it is trying to prevent the decrease in GFR, or it helps in maintaining it constant while the renal blood flow is going to decrease. Now angiotensin II, the role of angiotensin II occurs when there is low sodium diet or when there is volume depletion. So again, I'll specify the role of angiotensin II because its role is quite different from all other neurohormonal control of GFR and renal blood flow. The angiotensin II preferentially constricts efferent artery. And when it is doing this, it is increasing the glomerular hydrostatic pressure, but reducing the renal blood flow. So when any of the arteries get constricted, the renal blood flow will be compromised. But here it is increasing the glomerular hydrostatic pressure. And the increased formation of angiotensin occurs when there is decreased arterial pressure or when there is volume depletion. So whenever there is the stimulus of its increased formation, so it constricts efferent arterioles and thus helps prevent the decrease in glomerular hydrostatic pressure and GFR. And due to decreased renal blood flow, there will be decreased blood flow to peritubular capillaries also. So when there is slowing of the blood flow in the peritubular capillaries, there will be increased reabsorption of sodium and water. And hence it helps in reabsorption and retaining these things. We need them because of the volume depletion that is required. When the volume is being depleted, we need to conserve the sodium and water. So that is what is being done by angiotensin II. Okay, so I'll repeat here because angiotensin's role is quite important. It is just constricting the efferent arterioles. It is not affecting the afferent arterioles. And because of this constriction of efferent arteriole, as we discussed earlier, there will be increase in the hydrostatic pressure of the glomerulus. Due to this increased hydrostatic pressure, there will be more GFR. On the other hand, it is decreasing the blood flow. And due to decrease in the renal blood flow, there will be decreased flow in the peritubular capillaries. And due to slowing of blood, more amount of reabsorption of sodium and water will take place. This aspect we will study in detail when we are studying the tubular functions. Okay, but just now, just remember, because of these two actions of it, that is increasing the GFR, increasing the hydrostatic pressure, and reducing the blood flow, it is trying to conserve the volume depletion or the volume changes, whatever is happening due to these conditions. The third factor which is affecting these GFR and renal blood flow is prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are vasodilators. So what is it doing? When there is any vasodilator, it is going to decrease the resistance of afferent as well as efferent arteriole. So when both the resistance are decreased, there will be more amount of blood flow, there will be more amount of GFR. Okay. So that is very simple. Prostaglandins, since they cause vasodilatation, so they cause decrease in the resistance of afferent arterioles as well as efferent arterioles, and thus there will be increase in blood flow and increase in GFR. If there is blockage of prostaglandin synthesis, there will be fall in GFR obviously. So this mechanism is usually important only when there are other disturbances that are already tending to lower GFR. Then only this comes into play. Next factor which also influences these parameters is endothelium-derived relaxing factor, also known as endothelial-derived nitric oxide. EDRF is also nitric oxide. Okay, so as the name indicates, it is endothelial-derived from the vascular endothelium, and it is a relaxing factor. So it is causing relaxation. So once it is causing relaxation, it is EDRF, endothelium-derived relaxing factor. Some books also mention this as endothelial-derived nitric oxide. Okay, so once this is a relaxing factor, it is relaxing, it is decreasing the resistance of afferent arteriole, decreasing the resistance of efferent arteriole, and when resistance is decreased, that means they are dilated. They are dilated, there is more amount of blood flow, there is more amount of GFR. Okay, so this is also one of the factors. It protects against excessive vasoconstrictions. So in patients where there is endothelial dysfunction, as happens in atherosclerosis also, they may have greater risk for excessive decrease in GFR in response to stimuli such as volume depletion. Another very important factor is endothelin. Endothelin is a powerful vasoconstrictor. It is very powerful. It is constricting afferent arteriole to a great extent and also efferent arteriole. So it is constricting both the arterioles, and obviously the renal blood flow will be very much decreased and GFR is also decreased. Okay, so these all factors, they are affecting GFR and renal blood flow. To summarize all these neurohumoral factors which are affecting GFR and renal blood flow, first was sympathetic activity. Sympathetic activity causes vasoconstriction. So decreasing both these conditions. Catecholamines also have the vasoconstrictive effect, so decreasing both the conditions. Angiotensin has a preferential role. Only efferent arterioles are constricted by it. So renal blood flow will decrease, but GFR tries to maintain GFR. Endothelium-derived relaxing factor is a relaxant, so both will increase. Endothelin is a powerful vasoconstrictor, so both are going to decrease. Prostaglandins are again vasodilators, so both is increase. So easy to remember is that all those which are vasoconstrictors, they are going to decrease, and all those which are vasodilators, they are going to increase both the GFR and renal blood flow, except for angiotensin 2, which has got slightly different role. Just because it is acting only at one level, that is the efferent arterioles. All right, so you need to remember what all are vasoconstrictors and what all are vasodilators, and hence how they are affecting the GFR and renal blood flow. Coming to auto-regulation of GFR and renal blood flow. There are various mechanisms which are causing regulation of GFR and renal blood flow. They are known as autoregulation because they are themselves maintaining these normal levels of GFR and renal blood flow. The major things which are helping in this autoregulation are tubuloglomerular feedback. The second is myogenic mechanisms, and third is hormonal control. Coming one by one to it. First of all, what is renal autoregulation? Suppose this is renal arterial pressure shown here. And this is the normal value of GFR and renal blood flow shown in this figure. If suppose there is fall in renal arterial pressure, what will happen to GFR and renal blood flow? Initially, there will be sudden fall in GFR and renal blood flow, but immediately, within fraction of the minutes, within seconds, they will come back to their normal value. They will be maintained. Autoregulation takes place. Autoregulation is so strong because of various mechanisms, which we will discuss, that it will come back to its normal value. On the other hand, if the BP, if the arterial pressure increases to suppose 120, initially there will be just a brisk rise in GFR and renal blood flow, but immediately it will again be maintained to its normal value. So autoregulation is a very important function which is trying to maintain GFR and renal blood flow to the normal values. So how it is being done? The first mechanism is myogenic control. The simplest one I'll take first, that is myogenic control. That is ability of individual blood vessels to resist stretching during increased arterial pressure. We have seen myogenic control at various places otherwise also, in blood pressure also, and various other places. Whenever there's a stretch, there's an intrinsic ability of the blood vessels to resist the stretching by contracting. So the stretch is caused by rise in pressure, and that causes a contraction response of smooth muscles of the arteriolar media, thus raising the resistance. It prevents this contraction of the blood vessels, prevents over distension of the vessels, and it prevents excessive increases in the blood flow and GFR when the arterial pressure increases. So this is the simplest mechanism which is taking place. A simple stretch is causing contraction, and as a result, the GFR and blood flow is maintained. So this is the same thing which is explained here. When the arterial pressure is increased, there will be increased blood flow and GFR. So increased arterial pressure is going to stretch the blood vessels. There will be increased entry of calcium in the cells. Increased intracellular calcium causes increased vascular resistance because it leads to contraction of the blood vessels, and this is going to inhibit the change in blood flow and GFR. I'll repeat again what is happening here. Whenever there is increased arterial pressure, there will be increased stretch of the blood vessels, leading to increased entry of calcium in the cells. Increased intracellular calcium is causing contraction of the blood vessels, leading to increase in vascular resistance, and thus counteracting the increase in blood flow and GFR. So this was first mechanism, the simplest mechanism of autoregulation. Now coming to the most important mechanism of autoregulation, that is tubuloglomerular feedback. This is very, very important. Please remember, this is frequently asked, and it's very, very important because that is main mechanism which is functioning to control the GFR and the renal plasma flow. So for that tubuloglomerular feedback, we have already studied this apparatus. You must be knowing this. This is juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay, so what were the components of JG apparatus? There was afferent and efferent arterioles whose cells were specialized. They had become taller and they got specialized and hence named as JG cells or juxtaglomerular cells. Then there was a component of DCT, distal convoluted tubule, which came in contact with these cells known as macula densa. These cells are also specialized, and there were cells present in between the two known as the mesenteric cells. These three components were the components of JG apparatus. Now this will function as a tubuloglomerular feedback. As the name indicates, tubules are giving feedback to the glomerulus. How this is happening, we'll see here. First of all, see that the blood is entering the afferent arterioles, entering the glomerulus, getting filtered here. This is GFR, glomerular filtration, glomerular filtrate. Okay, so this is filtered here, first thing. Once it is filtered, it is passing through the proximal convoluted tubules, loop of Henle, coming to the ascending limb, and then DCT. This is distal convoluted tubule. This is the component which is coming close to afferent and efferent arterioles. So whatever changes are taking place, these macula densa cells which are lying here, they are going to send signals to the afferent arterioles to cause the required alteration. Okay, so what is happening here? If GFR increases, the flow through the tubule also increases. Flow past the macula densa will also increase. So the paracrine effect from macula goes to afferent arterioles. It sends certain signals to afferent arterioles, leading to constriction of the afferent arterioles. So they get constricted. They'll increase in the resistance. So hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus will decrease, leading to fall in GFR. All right. So this is a very important mechanism, tubuloglomerular feedback. As the name indicates, the tubules are giving feedback to the glomerulus. Right. So whenever there is increase in the GFR, that increase goes to reaches macula densa. This sends signals to afferent arterioles to be constricted. Once they will constrict, the amount of inflow will decrease, amount of GFR is going to be decreased. Okay, now how this is happening? So if there is decrease in GFR, there will be decrease in NaCl delivery. I think I told you earlier in the last class that macula densa are chemoreceptors. They sense the sodium ions. Okay, so how much is the delivery of sodium ions in this region can be easily detected. So whenever there is decreased GFR, there will be decreased distal NaCl delivery. There will be decreased macula densa NaCl reabsorption, decreased afferent arteriolar resistance, and thus causing the required desired change. Okay, so the same mechanism which I had shown in the last slide, the same is acting here, but it is mainly acting through the increase or decreased delivery of sodium ions at the macula densa. So whatever amount of sodium ions are delivered to macula densa, accordingly it is going to send stimulus to the afferent arterioles to either constrict or dilate. Now another mechanism by which this functions, tubuloglomerular feedback functions, is by secreting renin. I hope you remember that renin is secreted from JG cells, juxtaglomerular cells, that is the component of afferent arterioles. So whenever a stimulus reaches to the afferent arterioles, the common stimulus is drop in pressure, drop in blood pressure. Okay, so whatever stimulus reaches there in the kidneys, it secretes renin, which causes the conversion of angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. This gets converted by angiotensin converting enzyme to angiotensin 2, which causes action by various mechanisms. Most common mechanism of angiotensin 2, which we had already discussed, is vasoconstriction of efferent arterioles, thus elevating the blood pressure. Secondly, it also acts on adrenal cortex and cause release of aldosterone. So the function of aldosterone is to cause salt and water retention. This portion also we will discuss later when we will be studying the tubules, how aldosterone is acting on the tubules and causing the retention of salt and water, right? So all these mechanisms causes the desired change. So this is the summary of how tubuloglomerular feedback helps in regulating GFR, all the mechanisms which we have discussed till now. The decrease in arterial pressure is causing decreased hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus, decreasing GFR. This decrease in GFR causes decreased NaCl delivery to the macula densa cells, and as a result, it decreases the resistance. On one side, it decreases the resistance of the afferent arteriole, that is, the constriction is decreased, and increases the GFR that way because it increases the flow and GFR will be increased. On the second side, this macula densa cells send signals to afferent arteriole, causing the release of renin, which gets converted to angiotensin, and this angiotensin 2 again constricts the efferent arteriole and thus helps in maintaining the GFR. Okay, so tubuloglomerular feedback is a very important mechanism which is helping in regulating GFR. The same thing is written here. Whatever I have explained in that figure is written here. Effects of angiotensin 2, again, as I told you, it's a very important hormone. It causes constriction of efferent arteriole, and thus it increases the glomerular blood pressure and filtration and reduces the blood pressure in peritubular capillaries because the constriction is here in the efferent arteriole. Right, so the pressure in the Bowman's capsule in the glomerulus is going to increase, but the pressure in these peritubular capillaries is going to decrease. Okay, so when the pressure here, because the blood flow is being hampered here, blood flow is not proper here because there's constriction here. So when there is less blood flow, there will be decreased blood flow in peritubular capillaries. So it reduces the resistance to tubular reabsorption. So more and more fluid will be reabsorbed due to it. Tubular reabsorption is going to increase. So here urine volume will be less, but concentration of urine will be high with angiotensin II. Okay, so these were the major factors which were causing autoregulation and affecting GFR. So we have studied the hormonal factors, we have studied the tubuloglomerular feedback, and we have studied the myogenic control of autoregulation. Now, here we find certain other factors that influence the GFR. Like fever and pyrogens, they increase GFR. Glucocorticoids increase GFR. Aging decreases GFR. 10% per decade. After 40 years, it decreases. Hyperglycemia increases GFR, as happens in diabetes. And dietary protein, it is observed, high protein increases GFR and low protein decreases GFR. Thank you. So that's all. And I'll just see, I'll unmute you all and just see